The 11th statement says, teachers should teach simple language structures before complex ones. That was a tongue twister. Alright, well anyway, I agree with this statement. I really think that you need to start with something small, like for example, very specific example, is just working on basic vocabulary. They need to know the basic vocabulary before they start writing out sentences, because they need to work from something small, start with the things that they know, and then work on to a little bit more complex things. And the same thing is, you just need to start with a basic framework for your students so that they're able to produce something, and then they can then build up, and you can scaffold more things so that when they work up with the complex things, they can go back to the things that they've learned from their basic framework, then they can build off of that, and hopefully they can pull together the things that they need for their language learning. But also keep in mind though, even though teaching simple language structure is important in language learning, recognize that sometimes your students may not need to know the basic language structure. Maybe they've had some previous training. And so it's just important to know your students and know where they're at so that you can then be better able to work with them and understand them in a better way. You just don't really want to bore your students, but just understand like the importance of having the simple things but then working onto the complex things, because you don't want to immediately start working on teaching the complex things and then realize, oh wait, they don't know this at all, and then you end up having to go back and teaching the simple things and then eventually coming back to teaching the complex things, because that just is not going to save you time at all. So you need to definitely be aware of your students, and definitely if they do not know anything about the language, start simple and then work your way up. But if they know some basic things, you can start with a little bit more complex. But as a general rule of thumb, it is important that you start simple and then work your way up in your language learning for your students. Statement number 12 says, learners' errors should be corrected as soon as they are made in order to prevent the formation of bad habits. No, that is incorrect. I want you to correct that. That is not correct. We are not saying that. I disagree with this statement. Obviously, there's no way you can correct every single thinking error immediately as it happens. For one reason, it causes major frustration for your students. You do not need to be the person that's like the Nazi grammar police or pronunciation police and be like, no, this is not correct. You just need to be patient with your students and being aware of sometimes they're going to make mistakes a lot in their language learning, and there's no way that you as a teacher can correct everything that happens right away. Also, another reason why you probably shouldn't correct them all the time right away is because sometimes they may actually see the error themselves and correct it without without a necessary explicit reason why it is incorrect. So just being patient. And also another important thing is, you do not want to be the teacher that's like, no, 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 you're not doing that correct. Nope. Every word you say, oh, bleep, nope, nope, that's not right, nope, we're not doing this. You got to make sure that your learner feels comfortable in the learning environment. Language learning is a challenging thing, and it is difficult at times and often very frustrating. You want to make your learner feel comfortable and at home in the learning environment and not feeling like every single word that comes out of your mouth might be corrected. So you need to be aware and be patient with your students even when times are difficult and sometimes they just struggle. And that was an incorrect statement right there. So anyway, I do make errors, a lot of them, but yeah, that would be really frustrating if every single thinking word we said was always corrected. So in summary, you do not want to correct your learners' errors every single time because it causes major frustration. They might actually see the error themselves, and you definitely want to make yourself feel at home in your learning environment. The end. Statement 13 says, teachers should use materials that expose students to only those language structures they have already been taught. I disagree with this statement. I think this is completely off base. For one, you're trying to grow your students and to get them moving. And if you're only stuck in a certain language structure that you have been teaching them for the past, they're not going to get moving. They're going to be stagnant and be still and stiff and just right in that place where you don't want them to be. You need to keep them moving as a teacher. Secondly, it stretches them to move on to more difficult things. They're going to be challenged and grown as a fact that you're challenging them to move on to different structures than what they have been used to. And thirdly, it familiarizes them with the language. They need to become more familiar with the target language so that they are better able to speak the language in everyday life. So basically, this is all rests on you, the teacher. You need to get them out of their comfort zone and not just use the materials that expose them to the same thing all the time. You don't want your students to be bored here. You want them to be excited about language learning and excited about learning more things. So basically, don't do this because you want to get them moving, you want to get them out of their seats, and you don't want them to be stagnant. Absolutely not. You want to grow them, you want to challenge them, and you want them to see bigger and better things than what they have been. And obviously, you also want to familiarize them with the language that they want to learn. The end. Statement 14 says, when learners are allowed to interact freely, for example in group or paired activities, they copy each other's mistakes. I tend to disagree with this statement. I think that there are many reasons why errors may not be copied in group work or paired work. For example, many of the groups that you have may have different L1s in each group, depending on how you decide to place them. And so they may be coming from different perspectives and different ideas, so then they most likely will not come up with some of the same general language errors interfering from their L1, which is a good thing. Also, some of the people in your group may be a little bit more independent than others. So if they see something wrong and they don't think it's right, they're going to say something about it. It also depends on like the culture that you're in, but I think that's a good thing in group work. And the third thing is, it's also less likely for errors to happen in a group. And there are a couple of reasons why this is. There's a lot more accountability, and so they're going to kind of think through like, oh, well, I don't think that's right, or maybe it is, but I don't know. And so sometimes they're not always going to be completely on board with somebody, and so, you know, sometimes there may be some times where they immediately will write exactly the same thing as someone suggested, or they might kind of have it in their own thoughts. But generally, like, if they completely, all of them have an error, most likely they have no idea what's going on, they'll hopefully ask the teacher, and so that would prevent some of the errors. But I think grouped and paired work definitely helps to minimize some of the errors in your classroom assignments compared to just having each individual do their own paired work on something. The 15th statement is, students learn what they are taught. I disagree with this statement, because what does it mean by being taught? Is the teacher explaining facts, or are they just merely just spewing out this information and telling them to copy it? It is important that the teacher makes sure that the student is learning and working with the material that they need to know. Otherwise, the student really isn't probably going to be learning anything if the teacher isn't making sure that he's incorporating the information that they need to know to their audience. They need to be aware of their students and recognize that sometimes something that they may say may not make sense or is completely too easy or too difficult for them. So you just need to be aware of the students and making sure that you are teaching them well. Also, this also depends on the student. The student needs to make sure that he is willing to learn and excited about learning, and is willing to work hard at it even when the teacher may have some lapse of not doing too well in their teaching. So it is important that the student works hard in their learning process and works even though they may not agree with the teacher or how they teach or may find it difficult. they need to do their part and actively participate in the learning process. So teachers can rest in the fact that although a lot of teaching depends on you and how well you teach and how well you synthesize your material and making the students interact with it, it does also depend somewhat on the student. But you as a teacher need to make sure that you are teaching well so that your students are able to take what they've learned in the classroom and apply it to their real life experiences. Statement 16 says, teachers should respond to students' errors by correctly rephrasing what they have said rather than by explicitly pointing out the error. I agree with this statement. There are many benefits of rephrasing something rather than merely explicitly correcting a student. And here are a few reasons why. With rephrasing, it's a very quick and easy process. And when you rephrase something, for example, say a student says, "I've gone to the store." The teacher will respond in saying, "You went to the store." And it would be like, "Yes, okay." And so they can completely move on. Whereas if you do explicit correction, it might take a couple minutes longer and it might be a longer rabbit trail, something that you really didn't want to address in your class time. And also, when you're correcting someone through rephrasing, it's a little less intimidating for the student and he doesn't feel quite as embarrassed by being corrected. It's just a quick like, "Oh, you went to the store," rather than "I gone to the store." So that's just another thing. And also, the student may repeat it after the rephrase. For example, like if the student says, "I've gone to the store," you say, "You went to the store." Yes. The student will reply, "I went to the store." And so basically, he's repeating something that you told him. So instead, like a lot of times I feel like in explicit correction, the student may not necessarily be as quick to be like, "Oh yes, I went to the store," you know. So with rephrasing, it's just very quick, very easy, not too many rabbit trails, it's less intimidating for the student, and they are able to repeat it and also like see it rather than being told. So it's just like a quick correction and then boom, you're done. Easy. Statement 17, last one, says students can learn both language and academic content, for example, science and history, simultaneously in class where the subject matter is taught in their second language. I would agree with this statement. I mean, I think it's pretty cool that you can learn both an academic thing and a second language all at once. I think it's a really cool idea. It goes along with the adage, kill two birds with one stone. Boom. So anyway, even though it's a great idea, I think there's some things that you probably should consider to implementing this into an academic context. I think it's important that the students know your target language relatively well and are pretty well fluent, but they don't have to be completely fluent, just so that the students are not lacking in learning the academic content that they're supposed to for the class, because otherwise you can be focusing so much on the basic words, certain words in the English language or whatever the target language is, that your content may suffer. So I think it's just important to consider that. But as like a future English teacher, it's important that the teacher just recognizes the importance of different subjects and recognizing that sometimes they may have to teach it in another context, even though they may want to be explicitly teaching English. So anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me and my friend Anne. She dropped off. Okay. Thank you. It was so nice to see you. And I hope you learned a lot about English language teaching, and hopefully this will help you in the future as you'll hopefully be a teacher. Why, thank you. You're welcome. Bye. Bye.